Hello, it's been a while. I have posted videos in our AWS Zero to Hero series. So today I'm going to explain you about the VPC, which is Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. Basically, this VPC enables you to launch Amazon Web Service resources into a virtual network that you defined. Meaning, without a virtual network, you won't be able to provision any AWS resources like EC2 instance. So for if you want to create an EC2 instance, you should have a VPC. Not only VPC, there are some additional configuration as well, like subnetwork. So basically, this VPC resembles a traditional network. So this traditional network we use to connect in our data center, right? You know the Cisco routers where we will configure networks, the VPNs, and those kind of things we can configure in the VPC as well. But the advantage is this is massively scalable infrastructure of AWS. I'll show you how this is working. So I'll show you a diagram how the VPC and the related configurations are actually hosted in AWS. So when you open an account with AWS, and basically you will be attached to a region, right? And when you open an account, you will be there is a default VPC, virtual private cloud, will get created. Okay, so this is the VPC. See that VPC is span across the availability zone. This is the AP South 1, that means Mumbai region. In Mumbai region, you know that there are 3 availability zone, but for the limitation of this particular page, I have shown only 2 availability zone. So basically a VPC which is span across the availability zone. Okay, and inside the VPC we have to have a subnetwork. This is the subnetwork. I hope you got it. Inside the subnetwork we will create EC2 instances or resources, other resources. So to provision a resource we have to have a subnetwork and a VPC. That's the basic thing. VPC span across the availability zone. Subnet is dedicated to that particular availability zone. Okay, and if you want to connect to the instance from the outside world, we have to have an internet gateway. So that if you look here, that internet gateway is attached to the VPC. So if you have an internet gateway and attached to the VPC, you will be able to communicate to the instance as well as the instance will be able to communicate to the outside world. If there is no VPC, you won't be able to connect from outside, or the instance won't be able to connect to the internet. But there are other methods that we will talk later. Okay, and you know that uh, in networking there are many things we need to consider, like routing tables, VPC, NAT gateway, subnetwork, CIDR. I will not be covering the IP address and the subnetting concept, because this is a huge, that's a big topic. But I'll try to cover a small portion of the subnetting. Hope you will understand. Okay, so today what we are going to do, we will create a VPC, and inside the VPC we will create a subnetwork, and inside the subnet, that particular subnet, we will create an EC2 instance, and we'll try to connect to that instance using internet gateway. Okay, that's it. Let's go to the AWS console, and to get the VPC service, either you can type VPC here, or since I have already added VPC in the favorites, I'm clicking on the favorite button of VPC. As I told you, when you open an account with AWS, a default VPC will get created. So I have a default VPC, and subnets, I have 3 subnets, because in this region Mumbai there are 3 availability zone. So each availability zone is attached to a subnetwork. So that's a subnet. Let's look into the VPC. So I have, this is I manually named default VPC. Don't be panic, there won't be any name here. So for the better identification, I added this name. So this is a default VPC. There is a VPC ID associated with a VPC, and the state should be available. Since this is the default VPC, it should be available. Otherwise, you won't be able to create subnetwork, or you won't be able to provision any resources inside it. Basically, the network ID of the VPC is 172.31.0.0 with subnet mask 16. This is the default IP version 4 address of the VPC in all of the region in AWS. That's the point you have to remember. See, as I told you, when you are provisioning an resource, IP address will get automatically assigned to that. Not autom You can also have the option to disable the IP address, public IP or private IP. There is an option. I mean, public IP, not the private IP. You can actually disable that service. Okay, but you are getting that particular thing from the DHCP, that IP address from the DHCP service. Okay, and there is a route table associated with the VPC. We will cover that topic a little later. I'll show you that. So this is the default VPC which got created when we opened the account with AWS. Hope this is clear. Now what we are going to do, we are going to create, as per this diagram, we are going to create a VPC which will span across the availability zone. So to create the VPC, click on that create VPC menu on the top right corner. We are going to create only the VPC section. I'm not going to cover this VPC and more options. So for the better, let's name the VPC. I'm going to use this VPC for the development purpose, so, or the production. Let name this VPC as prod. I have a ERP running, so prod ERP VPC, just for better identification. Prod ERP. Okay, VPC, and I'm selecting the IP version for CIDR, not IPAM. I have to provide a network address. So this is based on your requirement. Okay, and please remember, if you are planning to use multiple VPCs, you have to reserve, you have to have a unique VPC IP address here. I'm going to use class C 168.1. Class C IP address 1.0.24. Okay, this is IP address, and the CIDR I'm going to use for my VPC. I'm not going to use the IPAM or IP version 6 CIDR or IP versions 6 on by me. No, I don't have anything like this. So I'm going to use only IP version 4. So selecting no IP version 6 CIDR block. Going to use a default. Let's leave all other option as default. So my VPC got created. If you look into here, there is a unique VPC ID, and the VPC is available. What else? The DNS naming resolution is enabled. So these all are the services, the additional services. So this is the IP version for address, network address for this particular VPC. Okay. So according to this diagram, we have created a VPC. I have named this VPC as, what was the name which we provided here? Prod, it's a production ERP VPC. Okay. Now what we need to create? We need to create a sub network inside a particular availability zone. Since there are 3 availability zone, let's create an sub network in AP South 1A availability zone. Okay. So subnets. To create a subnet, there is a menu on the top right corner. Click on create subnet. So this option is asking which VPC you are going to use to create this subnet. Let's select the VPC which we created, which is the prod ERP VPC. So this is the CIDR which we used, and you cannot change this here. Okay, so to create a subnet, we need to reserve some IP address from this part 0. So all these 24, I mean these are octet. 192 is an octet, 160 is a second octet, 1 is a third octet, and we need to reserve some IP address from the 4th octet. I'm going to take 2 IP address. Okay, so 192.168.1.0/26, so that 64 IP will be available in each network. As simple it is. So the first network will be 192.168.1.0, second will be 1.64, another will be 1.68, like that it will be going. Okay, so let's create this subnet. So by using 2 bits, see the difference is 2, right? By using 2 bits you can make 4 networks. That's a basic idea about this. If you need more networks, you have to make this either 28 or 29 based on your requirement. Okay, so for me, for our demo, this is enough. I'm going to create the network. Did we attach any availability zone? Oh, sorry, I missed to show you something here. Sorry. Let's create it again one. Okay, so subnet. I missed an important point. So here we will select the VPC which we created, and the subnet name, what was that? Let's name the subnet as this is for prod subnet. Let this for 1A, availability zone 1A. I'm going to create this sub network in 1A availability zone. So for the identification, I selected 1A. So I'm going to create this subnet in 1A availability zone, like in the diagram. I selected 1A availability zone. I'm creating an availability and subnetwork inside this availability zone under the VPC which we created. Simple. So 1A, let's use the 192.168.1.0 as I told you, 26. So we have 4 network. Let's create it. Right. So this is the naming. This is the subnetwork ID and showing it is available. And this particular subnet is attached to the VPC, which is prod ERP VPC, which we created. And this is the CADR range we will be having. Actually, there are 63 IPs, 64 IPs, but the first one, the 0, old 0 goes to network, old one goes to broadcast. Okay, so 2 IP address gone, and there are some other additional services utilizing a couple of IPs, and the actual available IP address will be 59. So 59 resources or EC2 instance you can create inside this network, and this subnet is attached to the region availability zone 1A. So there are some other additional information which we will cover later. So we created an EC2 instance. Sorry, we created a subnet. Now what we are going to do, we are going to create an EC2 instance under this subnet. Okay, so let's go to the EC2 instance tab. Okay, let's provision an EC2 instance. Clicking on launch instance. Okay, I'm going to provide a name here like prod ERP. This is going to the 1A availability zone 1A. I'm going to provide the name as app server 1, app 1, just for an identification. Okay, selecting AWS Linux as an image, T2 micro, the standard free tier, assigning a key like Nikhil training. Here, like I'm going to place this EC2 instance in the VPC which we created, which is the prod ERP VPC. And we have only one subnetwork currently created under this VPC, so that is available 1A. The subnet name is prod subnet 1A, right? Created. See, auto assign public IP. It is currently disabled. I'll tell you why it is disabled, and I'm going to make enable. When we make this particular section enable, then only the particular EC2 instance will be assigned with an public IP, so that we will be able to make connection to that EC2. In this case, we are not going to get connected. I will tell you why, and I will show you how to enable the connectivity. Okay. So create a security group. I have an existing security group. No, I don't have any security group. So I'm going to create a security group. Basically, what we are going to do, we are going to enable the SSH, HTTP, TTP, and what else we need? RDP. RDP is not needed since this is a Linux machine. Okay, I have basically enabled SSH port and HTTP and RDP. Let's copy paste the same here. Okay, so SSH from anywhere 00. Let's enable the HTTP as well. HTTP port 80 from anywhere, so 000. Okay, I'm going to the advanced details. I'm promoting this server as this EC2 instance as a web server, so using shebang. I'm writing some script here, bin bash, and dnf install httpd -y. So this will install the Apache httpd systemctl start httpd. This command will start the service. Systemctl enable http. This will enable the httpd service, and echo. What I'm going to do, this instance is from prd erp vpc. Okay, you can mention subnet. I'm not going to mention that. Let's this information written into the var www html index.html. Okay, Okay, so var www.html is index.html. So this particular HTML page is updated with this particular line. Okay, so hope all these are clear. What we are going to do, we are going to provision an EC2 instance in a VPC and in a subnet which we created. That's the basic agenda, and we will get that particular EC2 instance will also get assigned with a public IP address so that we will be able to make connections. So that is what the basic aim. Let's launch the instance. Okay, launching. Okay, let's get the status, instance running, refresh. Let's remove the filter. The status is initializing, so let's wait for some time. So now the instance is showing running, status is showing running. Okay, so let's try to connect to the instance, or let's try to what I would say, let's try to, I told you I promoted this server as a web server, so the page, the default web page should be available. Let's try to connect to the web page. So before that I have to get the IP address. So there is an public IP version 4 is available. Copy the address, just pasted, control V. Since I opened HTTP, so the page is not available. Okay, so the IP is not reachable, or the website is not reachable. Okay, let's try to connect to the instance using SSH. I don't remember where I copied my keys. Nickel data. I don't have it. I believe it's in downloads. .pem. Sorry, I don't have the PEM file available on my, yeah, keys. Here it is available. Okay, so this is the key I used. Okay, let's go to CD. Which location this is? Let's move to the documents folder, keys. Okay, so my present working directory is key. I'm going to try to connect to the EC2 instance. Clicking on connect, copying the SSH command, pasting it. It's not making connection. So this means there is something wrong with the network configuration. Even though we enabled the HTTP and the SSH port for this instance, it is still not available to connect. There is some connectivity issue. So let's come back to the diagram again. As I told you, to connect to the EC2 instance, the VPC should be attached to an internet gateway. See this. We have not enabled any internet gateway, or we haven't attached any internet gateway to this particular VPC. So let's go back and create an internet gateway and attach to the VPC which we created. So going back to the VPC. Okay, so this is the VPC which now you can see two VPCs. Okay, the one is the default, another one is the prod ERP which we created. To create an internet gateway, click on the internet gateway icon. This is the default internet gateway. To create an internet gateway, click on create internet gateway icon, provide a name. So this is an IGW short form, and this is going to attach to the prod ERP VPC. So this is just to identify, as simple it is. So we created VPC. Now what we need to do, we need to attach the VPC to the, sorry, we need to attach the IGW to the VPC. So to do that, go to internet gateway, select the IGW which you created. Under the action, click on attach to VPC, select the VPC which we create. So here it will display only the VPC which is not assigned. Since default VPC is already attached to internet gateway, which is not available in the drop down. So we selected the VPC which we created and attach. Right? So according to the diagram, we fulfill the requirement. Now let's try to connect to the EC2 instance. Okay, I'm sure this will not work. I'll tell you why. Let's try to connect it again. Nope, it's not working. So something is wrong again, right? Okay, let's try to access the web page. What was the IP? Sorry. The IP address of the EC2 instance is http colon 15.206 207 I mean to say 207.86.34. Yeah, 34. The page is not available. So there is some issue with the connectivity again. So to fix this issue, we have the VPC, we have the network, we have the IGW internet gateway. Still, we are not able to make the connection. That's because we need to have a routing table. Okay, I'll tell you how to configure a routing table for this connection. Okay, to see the existing routing table, go to the route table section, and you can see there are two route tables. What does this mean? When you open an account with AWS, a default VPC, as I told you, a default VPC will get created, right? Similarly, a default route table will also get created. Since I manually created a route table, since I manually created a VPC, a second route table is also got created. You can see that the first one is associated with the the VPC which I created. The second one, this is the default VPC. So a route table is the default table which get created each time when you create a VPC. Let's look into the default VPC, because if you are provisioning an EC2 instance, that EC2 instance will be able to connect to the outside world, as well as we will be able to connect to the instance. There is some configuration associated with this route table. Let's check what's the entry in this route table. See, the route table contains, there are two network routes in this table. The first one, as I told you, this is the default network. That means if any request related to 172.31. The remaining bits, anything, it know where to route. It is the local network. Other than any routes, other than if it receive any network, that request will be forwarded to IGW. Let's check what is the content in the route table which we created. So this is route table which we created, not which we created, this created automatically when we created the VPC. So there is only a network address which is 192.168.1.0/24. So if this VPC will receive IP address in this network range, it knows this is a local IP address, and it know where to route, but it does not know the outside anything. What I mean to say here, any IP address which is outside of this network, it doesn't know where to route basically. So to do that, we have to create a route table or entries to this route table, correct? So to modify, click on the route, edit routes. Let's add a route. If it receive any IP address other than this network, let it forward those requests to the internet gateway. As simple it is. Let's select the IGW which we created. This is the IGW which we created, right? Now what will happen? And you know that this route table is associated. We should associate the route table with the, see, this is already associated the 1A availability zone. So basically what we did right now, we added an entry in the route table. Other than any network, it should forward the traffic to the internet gateway. Now let's try to connect to the EC2 instance using the SSH. See, that's about it. We connected to the EC2 instance using SSH. Okay, let's try to get the page. It looked like some command issue, I believe, with the instance. But basically, we established SSH communication through the internet gateway by attaching the IGW to the VPC, by updating the route entries into the route table, and yeah, that's it. Hope this lecture is clear. So to provision a resource, an EC2 instance in an availability zone, you have to have a subnetwork, you have to have a VPC, you have to have a route table where to route the traffic, and if you need an outside world communication, you need a internet gateway, and you know how to configure it. And I will cover the VPN and other topics little later. Hope this lecture is clear. If you have any doubts, please comment. I'll respond to your queries. Thanks.